Ozzy Osbourne's sudden death came as a shock to the world. Soon after, Tony Iommi broke his silence, and what he shared left fans stunned. He revealed that something about Ozzy felt off that night, something he couldn't quite put into words until it was too late. He questioned whether the signs had been there all along, written in Ozzy's eyes. The reality of their final moments together is something that continues to leave people speechless. The morning of July 22, 2025, brought heartbreaking news. Ozzy Osbourne, the legendary frontman of Black Sabbath and the iconic Prince of Darkness, had died at the age of 76. The news rippled across the globe, leaving fans, fellow artists, and the entire music industry in mourning. Ozzy wasn't just a musician. He was a cultural force whose voice, energy, and eerie charisma helped shape the sound and spirit of heavy metal for over 50 years. Only weeks earlier, he had performed under the bright lights of Villa Park Stadium in Birmingham. Despite ongoing battles with Parkinson's disease and complications from multiple spinal surgeries, he sat upon a custom leather throne and gave a performance that was both haunting and deeply emotional. No one there, not the fans nor his bandmates, realized they were witnessing his last appearance on stage. His passing came far more suddenly than many expected. Although he had health challenges, Ozzy's condition seemed to have stabilized following that final concert. Reports even suggested he was preparing to return to the studio to record a final track. But just a day after sharing a quiet dinner with his closest bandmates, he died peacefully in his sleep at his home in Buckinghamshire. His wife Sharon and their children were with him. The idea that he was gone felt surreal, especially considering how lively and commanding he had been just days before at Villa Park. On July 5, 2025 in Aston, Birmingham, something historic took place. The original members of Black Sabbath reunited for what would be their last performance together. The concert, fittingly named Back to the Beginning, was more than just a musical event. It was a powerful tribute to the city where the band's journey began and a final chapter for one of rock's most influential groups. Though Ozzy was visibly frail from advanced Parkinson's disease, he made a breathtaking entrance. Seated on a specially crafted winged leather throne, the minimalist stage design paid homage to Black Sabbath's brooding signature style. But what stood out most was Ozzy's voice, still fierce, emotional, and filled with gratitude. He gave his all, knowing this might be the end. Over 45,000 fans filled the open-air stadium, while another 5.88 million watched via live stream around the world. It became one of the most viewed live music events of the decade. Many in the crowd knew this was likely their last chance to see Black Sabbath perform live, especially with Ozzy's declining health. The magnitude of the night was heightened by an all-star lineup that included Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Slayer, Tool, and Pantera, all paying tribute to the band that had inspired generations. Between performances, musicians shared heartfelt stories about how Ozzy and Black Sabbath had influenced their lives and careers. The entire evening pulsed with emotion, balancing celebration with the deep sadness of impending farewell. What happened behind the scenes made the night even more meaningful. Ozzy had made it clear that this show mattered more than anything to him. Despite the advice of doctors, he insisted on singing one final time for his fans and the bandmates who had been with him for over 5 decades. Those close to him said Ozzy had declared, "I'd rather go out singing in Birmingham than watch from a hospital bed." The concert wasn't just a goodbye. It was a mission. And it was a massive success. Through ticket sales, merchandise, and online donations, an incredible $140 million was raised. The money went to cure Parkinson's, a cause Ozzy deeply supported, and to Birmingham Children's Hospital, honoring both the band's roots and their enduring connection to the local community. As the final notes of Paranoid faded into the night, the stadium fell quiet. Ozzy lifted his hand, trembling and tearful. Beside him stood Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, each visibly emotional. There were no special effects, no fireworks, only the raw power of music, brotherhood, and the presence of thousands of fans who knew they had just witnessed the end of something extraordinary. This wasn't just a concert. It was the closing chapter of a legendary story. It was history in the making. That night, Back to the Beginning meant more than just a concert title. It became a powerful emotional moment, a tribute, a farewell, and the final roar of heavy metal's founding legends. Following Ozzy Osbourne's passing, tributes came from all corners of the world. From Metallica and Elton John to Slash and even Coldplay, artists remembered him fondly, calling Ozzy one of the greatest performers to ever grace a stage. Fans lit candles outside Black Sabbath's old studio and gathered near his childhood home in Aston, Birmingham, honoring the legacy of a working-class boy who became an international icon. In the middle of this worldwide mourning, one person's voice was awaited the most, Tony Iommi. Fans looked to Ozzy's closest musical brother and lifelong friend to speak on the loss that had shaken the music world. On July 23, 2025, just a day after Ozzy's death at the age of 76, Tony finally broke his silence. In an interview with ITV News, he described the experience as unreal, saying the reality didn't truly hit him until the next morning. "I woke up and it hit me like a ton of bricks," he said. For Tony, the pain went far beyond losing a bandmate. It was the loss of someone who had been with him through decades of highs and lows, creative breakthroughs, and personal challenges. Tony shared a touching detail from Ozzy's final weeks. Ozzy had deeply wished to perform one last time in Birmingham, not in a grand arena, but in a simple, heartfelt show to say thank you to his loyal fans. He wanted to go out doing what he loved and where it all started, Tony said, struggling with emotion. Sadly, Ozzy's health made that final performance impossible, but the idea alone meant a great deal to those closest to him. In the same tribute, Tony recalled Ozzy's quiet farewells, not just to the band, but to the millions of fans he cherished. "It's just such heartbreaking news that I can't really find the words. There won't ever be another like him," Tony said. "Geezer, Bill, and myself have lost our brother." His voice held the weight of a man who had shared not only stages but life itself with Ozzy. This was not just about show-us all rock and roll headlines. It was about a man who had faced demons and struggles yet continued to inspire people across generations. Tony's words touched fans around the world. Social media flooded with emotional messages, old concert footage, and heartfelt memories. Radio stations played Sabbath's music on loop. Musicians and public figures from James Hetfield to Elton John joined the outpouring of grief. It became clear that Ozzy Osbourne wasn't only a legend in heavy metal. He was a cultural figure whose influence crossed genres and generations. What made Tony's tribute so impactful was the deep bond they shared. This wasn't just a working relationship. It was a lifetime of brotherhood built on music and trust. To understand that bond, we need to go back to the very beginning. Long before they were icons of heavy metal, Tony Iommi and Ozzy Osbourne were just two boys growing up in Birmingham, England. Their story began not on a stage, but in the schoolyards and hallways of Beerfield Road School during the early 1960s. Back then, Birmingham was an industrial city, its skies filled with smoke, the air thick with the scent of metal and machines. For most kids, the future meant life on the factory floor. But for Tony and Ozzy, fate had something very different in store. Something that would eventually change music forever. Life wasn't easy, but it was straightforward and genuine. For kids like Tony and Ozzy, growing up meant being raised by hard-working parents, living on limited means, and rarely enjoying any luxuries. Ozzy, whose birth name was John Michael Osbourne, was the fourth of 6 siblings in a small, overcrowded house in Aston, a working-class district in Birmingham. Known for his mischievous humor, he often played the class clown, making people laugh and frequently getting into trouble. He found school especially difficult, particularly when it came to reading and writing, but his lively personality always helped him stand out. Ozzy has often shared how hearing the Beatles' song, "She Loves You," as a teenager became a life-changing moment. Although he didn't fully understand it then, that single tune pointed him toward a new direction. Tony Iommi, on the other hand, had a more quiet and introspective nature. Also a native of Aston, Tony was reserved and focused, preferring solitude and self-discipline from an early age. Music intrigued him early on, though he had no idea it would one day define his career. While Ozzy captured attention with his loud antics and charisma, Tony was more the observer, watching rather than speaking. Yet despite their differing personalities, a connection between them began to form. Although they weren't close friends during their school years, they were aware of one another. The shared backdrop of tough teachers, rigid discipline, and the looming prospect of life in a factory helped to create an underlying bond. Both of them had seen what the future held if they took the conventional route, and both quietly yearned for more. Living only a few streets apart, Tony and Ozzy continued to bump into each other after leaving school. What started as a simple familiarity grew into a deeper connection over time. Years later, Tony would look back and recall how even as a teenager, Ozzy's vibrant energy had stood out. In a city where becoming a rock star seemed impossible, these two boys from Aston unknowingly carried the seeds of something extraordinary. Before the records, before the fame, their story began with a friendship forged in smoky skies, gritty schoolyards, and dreams too wild for Birmingham to contain. And so began the journey of how two ordinary kids from a tough neighborhood rose to dominate the music world and become rock legends. As the 1970s began, a musical revolution started brewing in Birmingham, and its name was Black Sabbath. The band's sound was unlike anything before it. Powered by Tony Iommi's thunderous, riff-heavy guitar and Ozzy Osbourne's eerie, emotional vocals, their music introduced the world to a darker, more intense form of rock. At first, critics were unsure how to categorize their style, but fans immediately connected with it. What they were witnessing wasn't just a new band. It was the beginning of something much bigger, the creation of heavy metal. Their first album, Black Sabbath, released in 1970, began with ominous church bells and thunder, instantly setting them apart from every other band. The raw, gloomy tone of the music reflected the fear, tension, and working-class struggles they had lived through. The lyrics explored war, paranoia, and the supernatural, subjects that resonated deeply with a generation experiencing political instability and cultural upheaval. Just months after their debut, the band released Paranoid, which became their defining album. Songs like Iron Man, War Pigs, and Paranoid quickly became anthems and helped push the band to international stardom. The album soared up the charts in both the UK and the US, proving that their sound had worldwide appeal. Listeners were drawn in by the raw power, emotion, and authenticity in their music. Ozzy's piercing vocals combined with Iommi's sludgy, distorted guitar created a sound that had never been heard before. Their early success wasn't just a lucky break. It was the beginning of a legendary run. Throughout the 1970s, Black Sabbath released a series of groundbreaking albums such as Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and Sabotage. Each one expanded their musical scope. Iommi experimented with lead guitar tracks, and their lyrics began tackling darker, more personal themes ranging from addiction and mental health to the pressures of fame. Even as the band faced internal issues and personal challenges, the creative bond between Iommi and Osbourne remained powerful. In one interview, Iommi reflected, "What we created together was bigger than any one of us." That quote perfectly captures not just the scale of their influence, but also the deep connection they shared as artists. Throughout the 1970s, Black Sabbath performed to massive crowds across Europe, North America, and beyond, cementing their place in the history of rock forever. Black Sabbath earned a loyal fan base that stretched across generations. Their growing impact on the music scene inspired bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Slayer, groups that would go on to credit Sabbath for pioneering the sound of heavy metal. By the end of the decade, they had sold more than 75 million albums globally. No longer just musicians from Birmingham, they had become legendary figures who changed the face of rock music. However, their journey wasn't without its hardships. Fame brought its own challenges that deeply tested their personal bonds. Let's take a closer look at how they faced these trials and preserved the friendship that started long before the spotlight ever found them. The path of Black Sabbath was filled with highs and lows. By 1979, internal tensions and personal issues reached a breaking point, especially for Ozzy Osbourne. The relentless touring, constant pressure from the industry, and Ozzy's increasing dependence on alcohol and drugs began to strain the band. After several failed attempts to hold things together, the rest of the band, led by Tony Iommi, made the painful decision to let Ozzy go. It was a moment that marked the end of an era. Ozzy would later describe being fired as one of the lowest moments in his life, but it also marked the beginning of his successful solo career. Meanwhile, Iommi worked to keep Black Sabbath alive, experimenting with new lineups and lead singers. Artists like Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan, and Tony Martin each brought their own style to the band, but fans still missed the unique chemistry of the original members. Though the band continued producing powerful music, both listeners and critics hoped for the classic lineup's return. Yet, through all the changes and years apart, the connection between Iommi and Ozzy never completely faded. Time began to heal old wounds, and as they aged, both looked back on their early days with a sense of appreciation and mutual respect. Their bond, built on childhood friendship and shared musical discovery, proved too strong to be broken, even by decades of difficulties. Then in 2013, fans got the reunion they had been waiting for. The original trio, Tony Iommi, Ozzy Osbourne, and Geezer Butler, came together once again to release a new studio album called 13. The album debuted at #1 in multiple countries and was praised for reviving the raw energy of their early music. It wasn't just a return, it felt like a new beginning. After its release, the band launched a global tour. Although drummer Bill Ward didn't join due to disagreements, the reunion was still considered a major victory. Fans around the world celebrated seeing Iommi and Ozzy together on stage once more. When Ozzy passed away, it was the end of an era, not just for Black Sabbath, but for rock music as a whole. For Tony Iommi, it was a deeply personal loss. He hadn't just lost a bandmate, he lost a brother and a lifelong friend. In the days after Ozzy's death in July 2025, Iommi spoke words that captured the heartbreak of fans everywhere. "There's never going to be another Ozzy." That simple sentence carried the weight of over 50 years of memories. From packed stadiums to quiet studio moments. It was a farewell not only to a musical partner, but to a man whose spirit helped shape the identity of modern rock. Iommi felt that Ozzy knew it would be his final chapter. He gave everything he had, he said, and then quietly slipped away. It showed Ozzy's deep love for music and his desire to end his journey where it began, surrounded by his bandmates and fans. When remembering Ozzy's legacy, Iommi didn't mention awards or album sales. Instead, he spoke about the little things, the laughter, the late-night talks, and the storms they weathered together. "God, we go back so many years. There was one Ozzy and that's it," Iommi reflected softly. To him, Ozzy was irreplaceable, not only because of his voice, but because of the wild, unpredictable energy he brought into every room. Ozzy's influence on music was monumental. He was the electrifying frontman who helped define what heavy metal sounded and felt like. His voice, raw, emotional, and unmistakable, became the heartbeat of Black Sabbath. From young fans discovering Paranoid for the first time to global superstars like Metallica and Elton John acknowledging his impact, Ozzy's legacy casts a long and lasting shadow over rock history. For Iommi though, that legacy is something much more personal. It lives not only in the music and concerts, but in the memories forged on the streets and in the factories of Birmingham. Though Ozzy may no longer be with us, Iommi believes his presence will live on. His legacy will echo through the speakers of every fan who turns the volume up and lets the music roar. What do you think of the powerful bond shared between Ozzy Osbourne and Tony Iommi? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.